Speed. It's kinda important in Limbus Company. Whatever speed a sinner has for the turn determines how quickly they'll be able to take action in that turn, and most importantly, it determines whether or not a sinner will be able to redirect the skills being used by the opponent. However, there's rarely ever much of a need for more than, say, 11 or so speed, as most enemies in the game have fairly low speed, with even the fastest enemies usually only going up to like 8, or the occasional 10 speed for a special attack. So 11 speed is a pretty good sweet spot to aim for. But honestly, that's not nearly enough for me. I want to reach further beyond that. I want to speed like no one has ever sped before, go 80 on a 55, use every performance-enhancing EO gift as possible. I want to strap on some wax and wings and fly directly into the sun with complete disregard to all else. That's right. Today we're going to find out just how stupidly high we can take our speed in Limbus Company, for no reason beyond morbid curiosity. And I'll just let you know now, it's a lot higher than you'd probably expect. Before we proceed, time for the obligatory plug to like and subscribe and whatnot for more Limbus Company / Project Moon stuff. Yeah, that's about it. Don't really have anything else to say here. Let's get back to the video. Now, it's important to get the real basics out of the way first. There are 3 factors in determining speed, that being minimum speed, maximum speed, and haste. Minimum speed and maximum speed are very simple, just being the low and high points of the range of the speed roll each turn. Most IDs fall around the 3 to 7 range for speed, although there are extremes on both sides. We've got IDs like Base Merso or Mariachi Sinclair being tied for the lowest with a measly 2 to 3 speed range at Uptie 3, while on the opposite side of the spectrum, you got Base Ishmael, 7 Eastling, and 7 Otis with a pretty stellar speed range of 5 to 8. Haste, on the other hand, is the main thing we're going to be stacking today. Haste is a buff that increases an ID's speed roll by a flat amount equal to the amount of haste on self. Pretty much every instance of haste gained is next turn, since gaining speed same turn.
Every haste here is same turn!
Really just wouldn't work with how the game is set up. There are a lot of things in the game that can allow for sinners to stack up speed, ranging from skills to support passives to EO gifts, and that is usually done through haste. There are a few instances of things that buff min or max speed, but that's usually relegated to ID mechanics like Dalhan or Leash Holder, and is only present elsewhere in a few edge cases. Also, worth mentioning that for this video, we're going to be making use of Mirror Dungeon 6, of course. While you can stack up a fairly unreasonable amount of haste outside of it, there's so many haste-granting EO gifts that it'd be silly to not make use of it. Now that we have a simple preamble out of the way, we need to assemble a team. And of course, first things first, we need a star of the show. There are a decent chunk of IDs with some focus on gaining speed. The recent example is the High Show Pack Mao branch IDs, as their unique status effect, Strider Mao, just gives them a whopping 5 haste each turn for 3 turns. Thanks to them getting Strider Mao from their clashable counters and their skill 3s, it's pretty easy to keep this buff up for the entire fight. Despite this, none of the Mao IDs would be very good for the challenge. While they do have Strider Mao, they lack a stackable way to gain more haste than that 5 per turn, since it's not like you can get several different instances of Strider Mao up at the same time. We need an ID that's got a much more unrestricted way of gaining speed. If it's unrestrained haste we are looking for, another real solid idea would be to make use of Chef Ryoshu. While she doesn't have any haste on any of her skills or her passive, Chef Ryoshu's Evade, FI on sight, or Fresh Ingredient on sight, Sangria moment, gives her 1 haste next turn for every attack she dodges. If we were to assume that theoretically we used her in a solo, non-focused encounter, waited for 12 turns to get the maximum amount of skill slots, used 12 evades, and assumed every single enemy was using a 4-coin skill, we could theoretically get 48 haste on Chef Ryoshu. Now, that sounds like a lot to get that to work, and it really is a lot. It's realistically not super viable. And even if it was viable, it's beaten out in that regard. Meet Lobotomy Corp Remnant Faust, or LCR Faust for short. Whenever she uses her skill 2, she gets 4 haste next turn uncapped. So in that same non-focus encounter turn 12 solo situation, LCR Faust could use 12 skill 2s, granting her 48 haste next turn without nearly as many super situational conditionals. Now that's what I'd call speed. Psych, that was a fake out. You really think 4 haste per skill is anywhere near high enough to meet my wants? Because it isn't. We can still go further. Much, much further. Now, introducing the real hero of this story. Shi Association South Section 5 Director Don Quixote. This image is not from Mirror Dungeon. There is no external source of haste, this is all merely from Dawn herself. And the funniest part is, this is from only using 10 skill slots. At up type 4, Shidon's skill 2, Dual Strike, grants her a total of 7 haste, with a conditional of requiring Dawn to be below half HP. There is no cap per turn. If we use 12 of these skill in the same turn, you'd end up getting 84 haste. On top of her natural 3 to 6 speed range, this means that without any sort of external harp, Shidon can roll up to a 90 for speed. So you can probably see where most of the speed for this challenge is going to come from. She also has haste gained from her passive technically, but only on Wrath Resonance and only for a pretty bad trade-off of 1 haste per 3 Wrath skills in the Resonance. Her passive doesn't matter here, just figured I should mention it for the bit. So the general game plan is going to be send Shidon in for a solo and a non-focused encounter, make heavy use of her evade in order to survive for 11 turns, and then we send the preparation turn whenever we have a good opportunity, that being when Dawn has 12 skill 2s and all other various conditionals can be met. Next up, we need to take a look at what the other 12 Sinners are going to be doing in the meantime. Since we're going to be soloing with Dawn, all that matters here are the support passives, and there are a surprisingly small number of IDs with haste-related support passives, adding up to be a little less than a dozen. Thanks to the fact that we're doing this in Mirror Dungeon, we will have enough ego resources to get every single owned passive up, regardless of what it needs, but we will be going for 12 Envy Resonance, so any other type of Envy-based support passive is going to be off the table. There's going to be 4 main players here: Mao Ryoshu, Rhino Mer, Warpong Lu, and Zweiwest Sinclair. Let's go through them in order. Mao Ryoshu is a real simple support passive. For 5 Gluttony owned, 1 ally with the fastest speed gets 2 haste next turn. This is just 2 free haste, not really anything else to say about it. Rhino Merso and Warpong Lu go hand in hand, as their support passives are a first instance of a conditional that we'll need to keep in mind. Rhino Merso's support passive requires 3 Envy owned, and makes so that 1 ally with the highest charge count gets plus 1 max speed for every 5 charge count that they have, up to a max of plus 3 max speed at 15 charge count. This is one of those weird edge cases where max speed up is present as an external factor, but it does work out pretty well for us. It will require Dawn to be at 15 plus charge count, but that'll be fairly doable thanks to Mirror Dungeon eco gifts. Warpong Lu, on the other hand, requires 3 Pride owned and gives the slowest ally 2 haste as long as they have 5 charge count. Slowest ally may seem like worrisome wording, but when we only have 1 ally, Shidon is always the slowest, even if her speed reaches triple digits. And this charge count is already necessary for Rhino Mer's support passive to proc, so it's nothing new on that front. And finally, we have Zweiwest Sinclair. 4 Sloth owned, 1 haste to an ally with the lowest HP percentage, not a major speed increase, but a speed increase nonetheless. While those are the main 4, there is one other support passive worth mentioning, that being N-Corp Rodion. N-Corp Rodion has a support passive that does give haste and is wrath-owned, but it requires Dawn Quixote to kill an enemy. This is a bit of a problem since we ideally don't want Dawn to kill any enemies for reasons we'll get to later, just keep it in the back of your mind. But we will still put N-Corp Rodion here, as it's not like there's any more fitting Rodion support passives. And for a quick rundown of the other speed passives that we either can't or won't make use of, Butler Ryoshu's passive is worse than Mao's, Mao Otis's passive is Gluttony Res, Sync Merso's passive is Pride Resonance, Sync Sinclair's passive is Evade Based, and Senki's Dawn is a Dawn ID. You cannot support yourself. Now, after all the support passiving, we do still have several Sinners left without any support passives, that being Yisong, Faust, Heathcliff, Ishmael, Otis, and Gregor, so they're all just kind of there. I'll just fill in these slots with random other filler stuff for either more survivability, or more charge and poise support for conditionals. While a very quick thing to go over, it is worth mentioning that Dawn doesn't really have any egos that help out here. None of them have any sort of haste-generating passives, the only real use for them would be for more charge support for conditionals, although we'll be pretty set with ego gifts, so that won't really matter. For a fun unrelated fact, Sangre de Sancho's ego passive used to actually give Dawn haste before it got updated alongside a lot of the other base egos in the July 20th, 2023 update. Now, this haste would have been worthless anyways, as it is 1 haste for every 2 Lust Resonance, and we are going to be going for Envy Resonance, but it is funny to see how it would have been vaguely relevant to this video before this change happened. There's just one more crucial part of the setup to go through now, and it's definitely the largest part of the setup: ego gifts. There's a lot of them and a decent chunk of them that give haste. Let's go through the useless ones rapid fire, specifically in the style of the Poke Rap, because that sounded like a funny idea when I was writing the script. Pain Stifled Rage and Spoken Gunpowder, Bear Chris, Once a Blessing, and the Scalpel, T5 Perpetual, Motion Machine, Plume Proof and Dueling Manual, Book 3, Economy Class, Discount Voucher, Micro Precision, Time Accelerator, Shadow Bamboo Hat, Chains of Bond, Prosthetic Joint Servos, Automated Joints, Resplendence, Kai Spirits, Virtue G, Cultivation, Cut File, Carve Polish, and Effigy, yeah! Woo! Yeah! Eel Gifts, we can't use. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of EO gifts that theoretically would help us out, but they don't due to one reason or another. Fusion gifts don't work in solos, EO gifts that target slots other than one don't work in solos, some of them require Dawn to have a status effect in her kit that she doesn't have, or be a part of faction she just isn't a part of. The most notable one is probably Ancient Effigy, because you'd think 5 haste would be good, but it's only 5 haste for the second turn of the fight. Ancient Effigy can't target the same sinner twice in the same fight, and you can't control when it goes off, so not great here, unfortunately. Let's go through the EO gifts we can use now. Firstly, let's take a look at the floor-specific EO gifts, as they are an important part to keep in mind. Blood Red Mane is one of the EO gifts from the Faith and Erosion floor, which is only available as a floor 1 option in Mirror Dungeon 6 Hard. This EO gift is pretty nice, granting any ID with Wrath or Lust skills 2 haste if they didn't get hit the turn prior, although the downside of it being 2 bind instead if you do get hit. Shidon has both of the sins, so she gets the buff easily. The not taking damage the turn prior thing is something worth keeping in mind, as this does mean we'll need to make sure we avoid floors with unbreakable coin-centric enemies, since that would end up with Dawn getting thwacked and losing the haste from this eco gift. Spice Bush Branch comes from the Falling Flowers floor, only available on floor 2, and it has a very weird effect to it. Every time a sinner uses their skill 1, 2, and 3, they gain +1 haste each turn for the rest of the fight, stacking up to 3 times. This means there's a wee bit of setup involved, but that's fairly doable, I'd say, given how we'll need to take 12 turns to set up anyways. Harpoon Prosthetic Leg is from the Evil Defining floor, which is on floors 4 through 10. This EO gift gives 2 haste to an ally with the highest amount of poise. This means Dawn will need to have some poise, which just means we need some poise-granting ego gifts. Shidon does actually have poise gain in her kit, but it's really bad. Harpoon Prosthetic Leg can be made into a fusion gift by fusing with Nebulizer, but that actively doesn't help us for the haste side of things at all, since the haste effect is the exact same, with the only difference being that it gives more buff to Pequod IDs. Unless we end up getting an ego gift one day that lets other IDs count as Pequod, which isn't going to happen. This isn't happening. Biogenerative Batteries from the Murder on the Warp Express floor, which is another floor 4 through 10 type of floor, and it's a simple 1 haste from having 10 plus charge count, which Dawn will have anyways for Rhinomir's passive. I briefly mentioned the Spring Cultivation floor earlier as one of the gifts, and the fusion gift from that floor don't help, but there is another gift that does. Black Iron Barding, a Tremor Tier 2 ego gift from that floor, gives shield to an ally each turn, making so that if an ally with shield wins a clash, they gain 2 haste next turn. Since Dawn can't get hit during the activation turn to get Blood Red Mane to trigger, Dawn will always have the shield effect active for the ego gift, so she just needs to win at least 1 clash to pull through. Sounds doable enough. Now, the real annoying one is the gift. Gift is the fusion gift you get from Miracle and District 20 Buckgak by fusing together both the packaging box and the packaging ribbing, and it's the most annoying one, as these are 2 status effect-less ego gifts from a short floor, and it gets worse as the actual haste gain from this one is abysmal. 3 times per turn when any of the sinners lands an attack on an enemy, randomly give poise count, charge count, haste, offense level up, or defense level up to 2 random allies. I tested it out briefly, and it can't hit the same sinner twice, but what this does mean is that there are 3 separate 20% chances on whether or not it chooses haste, meaning there's a roughly 0.8% chance to get 3 haste from the CEO gift. I hope you aren't too concerned with the theoretical maximum speed value being anywhere near plausible, because the odds of this one working out are really bad. Haste is haste, I guess. Also, in case you're wondering, the unfused packaging boss has an almost identical effect, but it's on kill instead of on hit, so it's a lot worse. Now, all in all, this ends up leaving us at a decent number of required floors, being Faith and Erosion for floor 1, Falling Flowers for floor 2, floor 3 being a filler floor, and then we just need to get Evil Defining, Murder in the Warp Express, Miracle Buckgak, and Spring Cultivation sometime between floor 4 and when we want to attempt to reach max speed. Part of the question for the routing is going to be which ego gifts we take with the ego gift search function, as thanks to one of the new features from Mirror Dungeon 6, we can choose 3 ego gifts of tier 3 or below to start out with in exchange for a little starlight. Getting both packaging box and packaging ribbon for gift is a pretty smart idea, them both being keywordless EU gifts from a later floor, but it could also be worthwhile to try and minimize the number of specific floors you're forced to go to. While both Blood Red Main and Spicer's Branch are also keywordless, you can just restart the run until you manage to get both of them from their respective floors, since it's only floor 1 and 2. So my plan of action is probably going to be starting out with Packaging Box, Packaging Ribbon, and Biogenerative Battery, as Murder on the Warp Express has a lot of charge EU gifts, so it would likely be best to not try and push your luck too hard with that one. Now with the floor-specific EU gifts out of the way, we need to go over the rest of the EU gifts now, as there's some pretty important stuff in the generic EU gift section too. Shidon is a Shi ID, so it was kind of a given that it'd be a good idea to go with Slash as your starting keyword, since then you can start it with Resolution, which is just a really strong buff for Shi units, and one that works really well for this run. Resolution ++ means so that Shidon's HP is capped at half, being it so that we can always hit that pesky below half HP requirement for her skill 2's maximum haste gain, and it also grants her 2 haste on top of that. It's a double feature, how nice. Devil Share is a poise EU gift that grants 1 haste to ally with the highest poise potency, and 1 haste to ally with the highest poise count. Both can apply to the same ID, but if the target has Lust skills, it ends up being 2 haste instead for each of those instances, meaning that as long as Dawn has any poise on her, this is a free 4 haste. This EU gift can be enhanced, but it doesn't change the amount of haste applied, so it doesn't matter here. Curriculum Vitae, once upgraded to ++, grants 3 haste to all allies with 7 or more charge count. Once again, random or passive, this is free along the way. The haste is bumped up to 4 for allies with Gloom skills, but no dice on that for Shidon. Arrested Him ++ is one of the real annoying ego gifts. All allies gain 2 haste each turn, but only if every single enemy has bleed at combat start. What this means is we need to make sure all enemies have bleed at the start of the turn where we use all 12 skill 2s. This is a little tricky, but if the enemies are tanky enough, it could be solved deviously enough with Rusted Muzzle, if just the turn before the setup turn. Instead of evading, just hit every enemy with an attack in order to get some damage on all of them, getting Rusted Muzzle to trigger just a tiny bit of bleed. But Arrested Him only cares about there being any bleed at all enemies at turn start, so that should be good enough. Nice it would be to get something like Red Gossipium to trigger as well. That's pretty unlikely to happen, since 12 turns of stalling means all that count is going to be gone by then. And what is undeniably the most important EU gift for haste is Fluorescent Lamp. At ++, this EU gift gives a random ally 1 haste and 1 damage up for every enemy that has Rupture on them +3 at turn end. Against the theoretical 7 enemy team, this means you can get a whole 10 haste per turn from this EU gift, which is pretty good. And the conditional is really easy to trigger, as all you need is something like Talisman Bundle, which just gives all enemies Rupture as long as you just hit them each turn, so we're going to be hitting every enemy that turn anyways, so all enemies will have Rupture from Talisman Bundle, and we'll get our 10 haste from Fluorescent Lamp. This is also where the whole thing with Encore Radiant passive comes back into play. You know, the thing I mentioned I'd come back to later, that thing. Because the big issue with the Fluorescent Lamp is it doesn't work if we kill any enemies the turn of. Good thing is, though, with Encore Rhodium, we can afford to let a max of 1 enemy die, as the 1 haste lost from Fluorescent Lamp is repaid by her support passive. Now, it's only a single enemy's Rodiant's passive is once per turn, any more than that it's a net loss, but it will give you a little bit of wriggle room, something that pretty much every conditional up to this point hasn't given us the luxury of. That's all of the EU gifts covered. It's definitely a lot of things to keep in mind, but with Mirrodon 6's Starlight system, it'll probably be somewhat simple to get a hold of all of them in one run, especially since not a single tier 4 is needed, no fusion gifts, EU Grofks, any of the memories required at all. We're almost ready to actually sum everything up, but there are a few other things to cover that don't fit into the prior categories. We do get a little bit of max speed thanks to Starlight buffs, specifically a +3 to maximum speed. We're going to be running max Starlight rewards so we can get as many EU gifts as possible, so this one is pretty much free, assuming that you're looking past the whopping 800 or so Starlight investment at the start of the run. The weirdest of the speed conditionals, and what is probably the hardest to get off other than the 0.8% from gift, would be the fact that there is an Abno event that gives all of your Sinners 2 haste for every turn next fight, specifically KQE. If you choose the top option from KQE, then the top option, and then the top option again, you get this buff, which says your Sinners all get +2 speed for the next fight, which is worded weirdly, but it just means 2 haste every turn. Cool buff to get, but this only works if we fight KQ on the node directly before the fight where we attempt to go for max speed. As you can imagine, this is pretty dicey. There is a way to increase our odds, however, because if we go for either the Envy floor or the Burn floor, our odds of encountering KQE increase, as KQE's main Ego gift is an Envy Burn Ego gift. So we'll probably try to go for one of those floors in order to increase our KQE event odds, but this is definitely the weirdest of the conditionals in this entire challenge to try and meet. One other thing worth keeping in mind is that while we do want to use some skill replacements in shops to get more Dawn's skill 2s, we can't actually get rid of all of her skill 1s. We need to keep at least one in order to get 3 haste from Spice Bush Branch. We can bring Dawn to the point of having 4 skill 2s, 1 skill 1, and 1 skill 3, but that's the best we get. Meaning it may take a decent chunk more time in order to stall for Dawn to have a skill 2 ready in every single slot once we actually try and get this off. With everything added up together, we get to a final haste stack of 125 and a max speed roll of 12, so if I didn't mess up really simple math somewhere along the process, fingers crossed, this leads to the theoretical maximum possible speed to be 137. Pretty high. But now that the rather excessive theory crafting has been done, it's time we take things off of the drawing board and put it into practice. I'm well aware the odds of getting all of this in a single run is nigh impossible, especially with the gift chances and the KQE event, but I want to try and see just how close I can get. Main goal, get into triple digits, if nothing else. It's worth mentioning that this run was recorded the week after Spring Cultivation released, so this was before they added floors 11 through 15 to the game, although that really doesn't change too much since the odds of getting to that point and still being able to pull this off don't seem super great to me. In case you're wondering why I recorded this like a month ago and only finally edited it now, let's just say I've been a little preoccupied. But let's get into it. I've got the entire team set up and send full Starlight buffs. I grab Slash EU gifts to start out with for resolution, and then I use Gift Search in order to get both components a gift alongside Biogenerative Battery. Get Blood Red Mane from Faith and Erosion Floor 1, and Spice Bush Branch from Falling Flowers Floor 2, getting almost all of the generic EU gifts I need in the process. Since I didn't need to go to any specific floor for Floor 3, I just chose Repressed Wrath and continued to work on all the other miscellaneous goals. Floor 4 was Evil Defining, and I got the prosthetic leg in the shop there, on top of getting pretty much the rest of the stuff I needed for the run. Come Floor 5, I went for Spring Cultivation, got the Black Iron Barding, and spent the rest of the cost just seeing what other random things could prove of use, but I had everything I needed. I did manage to get Ancient Effigy there, which was pretty funny to see, worthless as it actually is. But after clearing that floor, I had everything I possibly needed, so it was now time to fish for a good floor to put things into action. I went with Pitiful Envy for Floor 6, as that is one of the floors where I could possibly encounter the KQE event. Managed to find 2 event nodes on that floor, but it unfortunately ended up being other non-important event nodes. Despite this, I did want to try and reach max speed on this floor just as a test run, so I did one of the normal nodes and I encountered the Mariachis. This is definitely a really bad fight to attempt this with. The enemies are all slash fatal, so Dawn just kind of cuts them down really fast, and I ended up with only a measly 94 speed value. How pathetic. To some, this may seem as a good enough value, but I'm no slacker. I end the fight and I carry on to Floor 7 in order to try again. At this point, I think I decided I wouldn't worry too much about getting the KQE event, since the odds there are pretty bad. Instead, I went for Abnormal Seismic Zone, aka the Tremor Hard Floor. This was mainly chosen since I thought that K-Corp enemies would be a pretty good choice, being really tanky and all, but instead I ended up encountering a battle that consisted of a bunch of Rose Banner guys. While this may sound like an unideal fight, these guys had 400 HP each and were all slash resistant, so it ended up being a much better choice than I expected. I decided that this fight was going to be the real attempt. The first 11 turns of the fight were what you'd expect, mainly just stalling out in order to get Dawn up to 12 skill slots. Did make sure to have her attack a little bit, however, as I have to use each of the skills 3 times to max out the haste gain from Spice Bush Branch. Dawn was able to passively get up to having max poise and plenty of charge, so those conditionals were always met. Although there was one other U-gift that I forsake trying to get to trigger, that being Arrested Him. There really wasn't a super solid way of getting bleed on all the enemies without doing more damage than I liked, so I decided to not worry about it in the first place. Means a little bit of haste is lost, but that's going to be the case no matter what here. I managed to get lucky enough to have all skill 2s ready on turn 12 of the fight, so I didn't need to stall any further and decided that it'd be time to pull the trigger. Dawn managed to land all but one of the dual strike second coins, and kills all the enemies except for one, resulting in some haste loss from Fluorescent Lamp, but otherwise the turn goes pretty well. Dawn did take some one-sided attacks, which does unfortunately mean the 2 haste from Blood Red Mane is replaced by 2 bind, but since the shield didn't get depleted, we still have the buff from Black Iron Barding. Add everything here together, and we get to a whopping stack of 99 haste. Haste is capped at 99. I really don't know how, but I straight up didn't for a moment consider that haste would be capped at 99 before this entire thing happened. It makes perfect sense with how most of the major stat effects are capped at 99, but I didn't for a moment think about this beforehand. Huh. Well, regardless, with 99 haste, natural speed roll of 5, and an unfortunate 2 bind inflicted by Blood Red Mane, Dawn ends up at 102 speed, meaning that I have in fact successfully broken into a 3-digit speed value in Limbus. I have definitely reached my goal. Mission accomplished. Now, let's reevaluate some numbers right now, this time factoring the fact that haste is capped at 99. Shidon's maximum speed roll with all the effects remains at 12, so this means that the theoretical highest speed in the game, when stacking 99 haste and getting a max speed roll, would be 111. Very visually satisfying number, that's for sure. You'd need to do the same thing I did and hit the 1 in 10 chance of max rolling a 3 to 12 speed range. If you feel like doing that, go for it. I showed it as possible with my run, and my goal was really just to get into the triple digits, which I did. So if you want to try and get the theoretical possible, go for it. I've shown everything you need to do here, and since we know haste stacks only up to 99, you've got like a 26 wiggle room so you don't need to actually get physically everything, and that helps out a lot. But unless there's any major max speed roll increasing things released in the future, or if I manage to miss something important, which is very possible, the cap is 111 speed. But I think that's going to conclude this video. This was actually an idea I first started scheming up like a year ago, during Mirror Dungeon 4, and I never really bothered to see it through until now. But now, it's been done. Shidon's haste gain is just really stupid, and I don't think any other idea in the game is capable of reaching the 99 haste cap, but that's just the case for now. It's a gacha game, things get added over time, who knows. But the one thing I do know for certain is that Shidon truly is one of the IDs of all time. But that'll be all for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!